2.8%. That was the chance given to PARIVISION to qualify for the Budapest Major. Behind staple names competing in the Tier 1.5 scene, you could safely ignore this team and focus on everyone else making their last run at the Major. Come the October 6th ranking update, however, PARIVISION jumped 10 places in the world from EU's number 25 to number 15, securing a spot in the Budapest Major. In a time where it's widely accepted that underdog runs at majors don't exist anymore, how did this happen? When you think back to the RMRs of old, how the Copenhagen Flames and the Bad News Eagles of the world miraculously catapulted themselves to relevance, you start to wonder, what magical story could have led to this team's success? Well, my friends, that's quite a story. A story of triumph through tribulation, where this team succeeded through it all, where they crossed oceans, lifted trophies, and being a bunch of Russian shitters you've probably never heard of. Yep. PARIVISION represents to me what I believe to be a wider discussion point in the grander scale of the new VRS circuit that we all operate under. I remember when Valve killed the major qualifiers, the supporters of that move suggested that there would be no need to scrutinize a team's right to be at the major. This is a case where, by the word of the law, PARIVISION have made it to the major, but scrutiny can certainly apply. Today I want to explore that scrutiny and explain how PARIVISION exploited a loophole in VRS to make this run possible, how it affects the teams around them, and if they deserve the spot that they occupy in World Counter-Strike. Let's start at the beginning. PARIVISION up till now have been a very low-level Tier 2 team. Whilst their roster has featured several notable talents, it's also shuffled more than a deck of cards. Established names like Patsy and Artfrost, among others, promised to deliver results that elevate the team, but they would hit a vicious cycle of earning praise, letting everyone down, and then binning off the players they likely shelled out for. Having missed the Shanghai Major last year, the org hoped to leave their woes in 2024, and they didn't. PARIVISION picked up Jame from the Virtus Pro bench, a player heavily criticised for his style of in-game leadership, causing the declining results that followed his own major title. However, being brought in as a dedicated AWPer with former teammate Kicker as IGL and surrounded by other promising talents, surely, this time, PARIVISION would make a run at major qualification. Nope, not at all. They crashed and burned in the Austin MRQ without a single match win to their name. It's hard to convey the frustration that regular Tier 2 viewers like myself felt around this team. So much talent wasted, and you were this close to doing something of worth. Always like one or two roster moves from unlocking the potential buried in the groundwork that they were built upon. But no matter how many changes were made, it never seemed like enough. That was until the summer. In the off-season, PARIVISION made changes from the top down. IGL Kicker was ousted to promote Jame back to captain and equipped him with other potential talents rising through the CIS scene, Zygulo and AW particularly coming from small projects like Gun5 and Amcal. So they were relying on a disgraced IGL and two players from teams with little or no reputation. How was this supposed to work? Well, apparently a lot better than you or I would think. Starting with ESL Challenger League Season 49, PARIVISION began making significant tournament runs online. These tournaments farmed the VRS ranking points, giving them more invites leading to more wins and more points. They were performing so well that you could picture them fighting for a major spot. The one thing holding them back was LANs. PARIVISION were online merchants as they had appeared at just one event in the whole year, a fact that would change as the cutoff loomed. They qualified for StarLadder's Star Series and the local LAN to LAN event. It was the latter of those events that gave them the final push they needed to make it to Budapest. But let's back up here for a second. How would you picture the fairy tale underdog run? It probably looks something like this. Philadelphia, Blocktober, the final event before the VRS ranking update, and the last chance for teams to qualify for the biggest event of the year. A tournament that features a good chunk of the best Tier 2 teams, and for both of the top two teams, only the title win will be enough to make it. Fnatic and 9 battled in a best-of-5 grand final, with 9 getting the hot start, holding the lead until the 4th map overtime that saw Fnatic edge them out for survival, eventually leading to the final map win, the trophy win, and the final spot in the major. Now that is a legit fairy tale run. Fnatic beating their equally matched peers on the high end of Tier 2 with a stand-in, mind you, returning to the Major a year on from the disaster in Shanghai that triggered a year-long struggle as a demoted Tier 2 team. They were given a 25% chance to make it to Budapest, and it came down to the literal last day, beating out other contenders like Big, OG, and of course 9. Fnatic did not have it easy, and it could be argued that they earned their spot. Truly, a dark horse underdog that everybody can get behind, right? Right? How about Gentlemates, a team that was given only a 12% chance to succeed and managed to pull off a stellar run in ESL Pro League, where they defeated Heroic, Legacy, G2 and Vitality, but they didn't actually make it to the Major. But if Gentlemates had beaten all those top teams, and yet it still wasn't enough, PARIVISION's 3% run surely had to be one for the history books, right? It's got to be teams like Vitality and the Mongols and Falcons, Spirit, Maus, right? Right? So the titans that PARIVISION toppled to make their major included 9 Boom Pro, a mixed team of reject players benched from other CIS teams. Okay. Nuclear Tigers, who I guarantee that you've never heard of, and, oh Jesus, Tapu, Tapu. I'm not making this up. This is a real team that plays real Counter-Strike. They've got a fucking logo and everything. So why are you bringing this up, Jay? Like, surely the grand final is the important matchup. The prize pool points and the first place win, the trophies and all. Isn't that what's important? Well, yeah, the prize money is the single biggest points contributor to PARIVISION from this event. But the grand totality of points came from a separate category on VRS entirely, dedicated just to LAN wins. To give you an idea of how important this category is, PARIVISION had 68 points for 2 LAN wins before LAN to LAN, and once LAN to LAN was factored in on October 6th, that category jumped to 249 points. It's a very big deal for Tier 2 teams especially. Here's a breakdown of how each of those matches added up to that number, and if this looks like an error to you, then get that thought out of your head, because a win over BetBoom really does count for the same as the fucking poo-poo team. Every LAN win is treated as an equal, and this applies to the logical extreme. Fnatic's Blocktober run, for example, wins over Metasport, Big, OG, and 9, all the same points. Remember Gentlemates? They missed the major, but in EPL, they beat Heroic, Legacy, G2, and Vitality. Even though the Vitality result falls outside of the cutoff, the pattern remains. All those matches, same number of points. A win over the #1 team in the world is really the same as a win over BetBoom, which is the same as a win over Tapu, Tapu, at least in this one category. To balance this, each of these results are subject to the opponent network and head-to-head adjustments categories. So on their own, Fnatic and Gentlemates won more points per opponent than PARIVISION, but that's only on each of those isolated events and doesn't factor in the head-to-head losses or the prize pool points. Yeah, did I not tell you? LAN to LAN had a prize pool of $50,000. Blocktober had 5 times less. This tournament, with this level of teams, was worth 5 times as more as this tournament with this level of teams. At this late stage in the major cycle, this CIS-only region-locked event would secure a major spot for any team that was in the race, especially with higher-ranked Virtus Pro being forced out of the ESL Pro League, and that was expected at a tournament favourites BetBoom. With VP also absent in Moscow, the rest of the field seemed far weaker by comparison. It was only because PARIVISION edged the trophy from BetBoom that the spot was effectively stolen by LAN to LAN's actual champions. With that level of competition, there's less likelihood to lose points too. In the head-to-head category, teams can go negative, as is the case in both Fnatic and Gentlemates, either due to upsets on LAN or in unpredictable and less reputable online cups. In an event like LAN to LAN, the chances of a PARIVISION losing points like this are far less than other teams in the race. And this is the exploit that PARIVISION used. You can play high prize pool, low competition LANs and get more points on average than if you risked an international or top tier event. The theory behind this phenomenon has been floated around the CS scene for a while, particularly in the wake of Imperial Valkyrie's Tier 1 invites, thanks to invites they garnered through the women's only ESL Impact LAN. And more recently, 3D Max, a top 10 team in the world, declined an invite to the Tier 1 Blast Open Fall in favour of the weaker Perfect World CS Challenge, where they won undefeated with $22,000 and 3 LAN wins worth of points. The theory is the same. Points are gathered by succeeding in a LAN with a lesser field of competition. The difference is that Valkyries didn't hold on to their Tier 1 invite spot for long, and 3D Max are already a top 10 team in the world. Neither of these two examples defined a major invite. PARIVISION did. And I'm left asking myself, should things be this way? VRS is a weird system that has provided both positives and negatives, in my opinion, and we're still trying to figure out its wider effects. I think runs like PARIVISION's reveal a wider conversation we need to have about VRS. What is it supposed to do? The way I always saw it, the rankings were to turn Counter-Strike into a meritocracy. Yet tournaments like LAN to LAN seem poised to do the opposite. The question has always loomed, what's stopping a TO from putting on a LAN that artificially elevates a specific region or team? LAN to LAN does that by design. Their rulebook explicitly limits tournament eligibility to a handful of countries, and if they can do it, what's stopping anybody else? On the other side though, events like LAN to LAN are prevalent because of VRS, and that also applies to other operators. Established BYOC and grassroots events like Epic LAN and Fragadelphia have received increased interest with international teams, letting them build their profiles and businesses, whilst new tournaments like Birch Cup, Draculan and Glitched among others have been allowed to sprout from nowhere. With this emphasis on LAN, we can see how teams perform under pressure in an environment with better integrity, something that the online environment can't provide. However, the local scenes that these events were originally designed to serve lose their chance to shine. It's been known that HLTV will only allocate coverage and gather match data that Valve use to power the VRS rankings if the event is relevant enough. Take Epic LAN as an example. In past years, the event had only around the top 4 make it to HLTV, but this past summer the event had whole playoff coverage, only to then reduce that to the top 8 in the October event. The reason? The Summer LAN had more ranked teams than the October event. Plus, there's a power imbalance with resources. For example, PARIVISION have the resources to send their team to Epic LAN, but GlitchTech, a local team to Epic LAN, cannot afford to send their team to LAN to LAN. So the bigger teams can farm easy points to the detriment of the actual grassroots. Although grassroots sports does work like this traditionally, like you have to pay to play in Sunday League football here in the UK, so maybe that's an okay thing? Although, to be fair, this is like if Charlton Athletic decide they're going to play in the Isthmian League, which might piss off a few people. I don't exactly blame the Tier 1.5 teams for doing this either, because there isn't really any other events to make up their points. Since there are no Tier 1.5 tournaments anymore like ESL Challenger or DreamHack Open, there's nowhere else to bridge the gap between amateur and pro. Do you see why this topic is worth talking about here? Everything here seems to have a pro and con, so let me just soapbox a little bit and summarize my opinion and offer that to you to see whether you agree or disagree. I think VRS offers up the opportunity to turn Counter-Strike into a true meritocracy of an esport, and that is what it should aim to do. But the framework in place right now isn't there to make it so. And the only way to correct these issues is if we as a community and Valve as a company come together to hammer out exactly what we want out of VRS and how we intend to achieve that. If you've watched this and think that I'm trying to imply that PARIVISION are incapable or undeserving of their spot at the major, that's not my intention. I actually think that they're an evolution upon the underdogs that we had before, and having watched them in Tier 2, I do believe they've got something about them. And that's been shown in this major with how far they got, making it all the way to Stage 3. Speaking about their online performances, PARIVISION had one of the best records, so much so that their head-to-head category had positive points, something that a lot of their peers cannot say. My issue is that historically we've put LANs well above online competition, and if you can't perform on LAN, then you shouldn't be in a Tier 1 conversation. This even reflects in the ranking having a dedicated category for LAN successes. PARIVISION wouldn't have made it to the major if it wasn't for LAN to LAN, so to see it come out of a majoritively weak field of opposition makes it feel so underwhelming. One of my curses as a commentator is that I have to weigh up the objective achievements of a team, but the fan in me wants to believe in the fairy tales of underdog success, and this creates a conflict of perspective. The major appearances of Bad News Eagles, Copenhagen Flames and Gamer Legion will live on in the hearts of fans forever, but oftentimes these teams succeeded in less than ideal circumstances for the Tier 1 squads, and yes, some had fluke runs. The fact that they had no reputation prior or following their respective runs is evidence of that. And that's where I'm most torn about it, because the fan in me wants to believe that PARIVISION have made this magical major run that defies all the odds, the ultimate of the underdog stories. But the truth is, it's not.